coming to you live from Tennessee, from the east to the west. We are talking Cowboys everything. And you've just entered
the Cowboy Zone.
Welcome back to another episode of the Cowboy Zone. It's your boy Marcus Jones, the Bluff City Cowboy, coming to you live from Memphis, Tennessee. And tonight, my condolences to my co-host Lambo. Just found out that his uncle passed, I believe, yesterday. So he's kind of with his family, dealing with that, dealing with his kids, dealing with his wife, setting things up for the funeral. So my condolences to Lambo and his family. But the show must go on. So thank you guys. Welcome to the Cowboy Zone. I'm going to be rolling solo tonight. And Lambo kind of gave me the green light that I can kind of talk about this. It's something I talk about every week. If you guys follow the Cowboy Zone, if you follow me in chat rooms, I'm always bringing up special teams and the importance of special teams in creating the 53-man roster. You guys hear me throw out certain players' names all the time, and I'll say this guy has a better chance to make it than somebody else. And I get a lot of flack about it. So tonight, I really just wanted to dive a little bit. I don't want to go too much in the weeds with special teams because I know that's not everybody's passion like mine. So I just want to hit a couple of points about special teams, talk about the importance of special teams in the makeup of a roster, and then kind of talk about why I feel certain players have a better chance than other players. So before we get started, thank you everybody who's joining so far. If you haven't done so already, make sure you like this and also make sure you share it. I know a lot of you guys are watching from Lambo's pages, so also make sure you like and share from his page as well. And also go throw me some support on my page. I'm Bluff City Cowboy on all social media. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Should be some interesting dialogue for anybody who's interested in learning a little bit more about special teams or to just get a little bit more insight of the stuff that I talk about on a weekly basis. So please, guys, keep the comments coming, keep the questions coming. If there's something you want to add on to it, because I'm not a special teams expert, if there's anything you can add that I can put out there to the people, make sure you put it out there. Before we get started, I see DJ Dog came in pretty early with the comments. Thank you for your support. He says he believes in special teams. He thinks more starters should be used on special teams. That's something we'll kind of talk about tonight. And he says he doesn't consider Noah Brown, Cedric Wilson, or Rico Dowdle safe bets to make this team because of special teams. I definitely agree with those as well. I will say a couple of those guys have a better shot than other guys, but you're right. Special teams does not guarantee them a roster spot. Okay, let's go through the comments. I see we got my guy Charlie in here. One half of Dallas Cowboys Uncensored. Thank you for your support as always. Mendoza, thank you for tuning in. Appreciate your support as well. And we got Eric coming in, second half of Dallas Cowboys Uncensored. Make sure you check those guys out. Make sure you find their Facebook pages, their social media. They've got some great guests coming up over the next couple of weeks. They're also going to be guests on the Cowboy Zone in a couple of weeks as well. So make sure you guys stay locked in with us so that you can see that episode. I'm sure it's going to be very interesting. So thank you guys both. I'll be sure to send a condolences to Lambo. And I know he'll probably rewatch this, so he'll see it as well. Taiwan, as always, man, thank you for your support. Definitely appreciate you and all you do for the Cowboy Zone since day one. Same thing for my guy Jeff. Thank you for tuning in as well. Appreciate you coming in here. Jacob Trevino, thank you for coming back. I know you're kind of a new viewer, so thank you for coming in. And he says special teams is the reason why they keep Bernard and Gifford. They definitely both have a great chance of making special teams, and we'll kind of talk about that as we get into it. And DJ Dog says those 90s Cowboys had starters like Woody and Moose playing special teams. We'll definitely get into that as well, just a little bit. And I don't think Lambeau posted it on social media. He kind of hit me up and told me what was going on, but he didn't mind me sharing. So it's not something he just wanted to put out there in the open, but you guys are like family. So we want to let you guys be aware of everything that's going on with the Cowboy Zone, both with the podcast and in our personal lives. See, we got Geechee in the building. Thank you for tuning in. I know you probably know more about this than I do. So if there's anything you can add specifically, make sure you get in those comments and let me know. And DJ Dog talks about those 70s teams with guys playing special teams as starters. So we got a lot to hit on. Like I said before, I won't get too far into the weeds with special teams. I just want to hit some of the high points just to make you guys aware of certain things. I know you guys probably know a lot of this stuff, but it's just something I want to reiterate, something I want to put out there to let you guys know kind of what's going on. And Geechee talks about our starting field position. We got to do better this year on special teams. You know, I was looking at special teams, and there's something interesting I noted about our kickoff return game that I'm going to talk about in a minute. And it's something not very many teams in the NFL do. So I don't know. It looks like it might be a Bones Fossil thing. So hopefully it's an improvement, or maybe it's what hinders us. And then Geechee asks, who's going to be the returner? We haven't had a true returner in years. Now, I don't have an answer to that question, but we're going to just talk about special teams in general. Past couple of years have been Tony Pollard and Cedric Wilson. Just from looking at the way the team has been constructed last year, I don't see how Cedric Wilson can keep that returner spot. And like you and Mendoza said, and Jeff is also tuning in with that, field position has been very important. We need a bona fide returner. We haven't been getting punt returners. It's been a lot of fair catches. Even with CeeDee Lamb back there, we're still doing a bunch of punt returns. And again, just looking at how we do our special teams, I went back, I watched about 5 games strictly for special teams, and I noticed something that we do that a lot of teams don't do. I don't think they're going to get away from it, but I think they answer a lot of questions about why our return game isn't as good as it should be. So Mendoza talks about Dixon and TP being our returners. You just never know based on the importance of the position. Yeah, and Geechee, you're right. Offense can't keep trying to sustain 80-yard drives no matter how powered we think our offense is going to be. We got to get those guys some help on that third phase of our team. All right, guys, so before we get started, once again, if you haven't done so already, make sure you like the broadcast. Also, make sure you share it. Shouts out to Charlie and Jeff. And I can't see everybody, but it looks like quite a few of you guys shared it. Jack Meeker, he's always sharing it. So thank you. Appreciate that. You guys kind of started sharing before the broadcast started. Everybody who's here right now, make sure you share this. Share it to your personal page. Share it to your favorite Facebook group. You guys are going to leave great comments that people need to see. I'm going to try to put as much knowledge out there as I can. And hopefully this will help inform somebody about the importance of special teams when it comes to Dallas. And definitely love CJ Goodwin as our special teams captain. He's definitely special at what he does. I don't think he played more than 2% of the all defensive snaps last year, but I think his spot is secure. Like, no question. All right, guys. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I got quite a few slides. I don't know how long it's going to take for me to go through everything, so I don't want to keep you guys here all night. It may be a little quicker than I think. I just don't know. But let's go ahead and dive in. And again, like I said, make sure you like, make sure you share, make sure you keep leaving these great questions and comments because I haven't even started yet, and you guys are on a roll. Taiwan says need to try boss man at punt return. We definitely need to make some changes. Anybody who can punt return. I see we got my guy Jay Tuck in the building, killing it in the podcast game right now. Shouts out to you. Thank you for tuning in. And Geechee talks about special teams is very important for the Patriots. Everybody loves to talk about Tom Brady, and they talk about the defense and Bill Belichick. But they don't give love to Slater, a guy who's made, I believe, 7 Pro Bowls in 10 years. Special teams is very important to the success of the New England Patriots. You are 100% right on that, Geechee. James Gary, thank you for joining us. Appreciate your support as always. Charlie, you're right. They were a little bit better last year. I think just making the changes with our special teams coordinator helped out a lot. It's not as good as it should be because we're still not getting punt returns. But Tony Pollard was getting a little bit more confident in the kick game. And they started doing a little bit more Rico Dowdle back there as well. That would be a great exercise, Geechee. And actually, I'm going to do the same thing as well. And maybe me and you can get together either on air or off air and compare notes about top special teams and how successful they are in the playoffs. Because I know for a fact every year the Patriots are top special teams. And I'm almost certain last year the Colts had the best special teams in the NFL. Jacob Trevino says CD needs to get on punt unit. He's actually already on punt unit. He's just not returning. Nobody is really. It's been mostly fair catches. And again, I watched quite a few games. I looked at how we do punt return. There was something that stood out to me that most teams don't do. And I think that's one of the main reasons why our punt game and our kick return game have been so lackluster. All right, guys. So let's get into it real quick. So first of all, I didn't do this research on my own. One of my very close friends that I've known for probably 20 years named Jonathan Webster, Coach Webster. He's a college coach for a national championship junior college. And he's also done some internships with the NFL. And just to give you guys a little heads up in the future, I didn't know this, but my friend Coach Webster was actually an intern for the Atlanta Falcons for 2 years. And he worked very closely with Dan Quinn. And my friend is currently the defensive coordinator for a junior college. And he pretty much based his entire scheme off of the concepts that he learned from Dan Quinn. So he's met Dan Quinn. He's still in communication with him. And he knows the cover 3, 4-3 under scheme backwards and forwards. So in the next week or two, I'm going to bring him on the show. He's going to talk to us about Coach Quinn. He's going to talk to us about the 4-3 scheme and the cover 3 on the back end. And he's going to give us a little bit of insight into what we can expect from Coach Quinn, as well as players like Keanu Neal and DeMonte Casey, because my friend was a secondary coach as a specialist. So he, luckily for us, was very close to both of those guys while he was doing his internship in Atlanta. So he should be able to give us a lot of inside knowledge, as much as he can, without getting in trouble, kind of like what we went through with George Teague a couple of weeks ago. So he's going to come on the show. He's going to give us some insight, talk to us about the cover 3, talk to us about Dan Quinn as a coach and as a person. Jeff says he doesn't want to see CD on punt return. I wouldn't either. I feel like we should be able to find some better return options that are on the team this deep. And Mendoza says, do I think field position has any correlation to the red zone woes? Now, that one would be interesting to look at. I could definitely see, I don't know about red zone in particular, but I could see in terms of touchdowns, because you got the team starting off 15 to 20 yards further back than they should. So that's an extra 1 or 2 first downs every drive that the team is kind of forced to have to try to get in the end zone. And if most teams outside of Kansas City are methodical teams that moving the chains, it's hard to get in the end zone when you're behind the 8 ball the extra 20 yards. So I don't know so much about red zone woes, but definitely in terms of scoring touchdowns versus field goals, I can see that correlation. And Jack Meeker, again, thank you for your support. And I'm definitely glad that you're enjoying what we're doing. All right, guys, let me get into it because I see the comments have been coming, and I want to get you guys comments on the stuff that I have kind of prepared. So, just to give you guys a little bit of backtrack on something I talked about a couple of weeks ago. Like I mentioned before, special teams. A typical game has about 100 snaps. Of those 100 snaps, 65 of them go to offense and defense, and roughly 30 to 35, 32 to 36 snaps go to special teams. So special teams is literally a third of the game for every team. And I know everybody tries to downplay it, but this is actual. Out of 100 snaps, 30 or so are special team snaps. So special teams is very important to the makeup of a team. So now we go into a breakdown of the different special teams units. Now, I talked to Coach Webster about this, and in his mind, every team and every special teams coach, their main focus is on what he calls the big four. That's kickoff, kickoff return, punt return. Field goal and field goal block are usually more in terms of extra points. Unless a team kicks a bunch of 45, 50 yarders, field goal and field goal block are pretty much automatic in terms of what they do. They do affect the games in terms of points, but they don't affect the games in terms of field goal and a field position. And field position is one of the most important things for a special teams coach. So now just talking to my friend Coach Webster, he gave me a different look on how a team is made up. So when we as fans look at the team makeup, we always try to come up with these different narratives in our mind about, well, this player is a coach's favorite and this player has a connection with this defensive coordinator position coach. He pretty much told me I need to take those things kind of out of my mind when it comes to the makeup of a team. Sometimes coaches have favorites, but that's not very often. When you want to look at the makeup of a team, there are 4 different categories of players. Number 1, you got your starters. Number 2, those starters have backups. Those are the guaranteed spots on the team. And then you got your number 3, which are your high draft picks that year. Now, for some people, this can be stretched out to the 5th round. Some people go 3rd round. I'm more of a 4th round guy. If you were picked within the first 150 picks, I think you're at least guaranteed 1 year on a team. Now, 5th, 6th rounders, 7th rounders, those guys have their work cut out for them. But I think for the most part, if you fall within the first 150 picks, you're pretty much guaranteed a spot on the team for 1 year. So once you get those 3 spots out of the way, those are all guaranteed. Everything that's left, all those spots are reserved for special teamers. Now, I know people think, well, they really like this guy, so they're going to give him a roster spot. And every year we see certain players that we think are going to make the team and they don't. Jon'Vea Johnson, Rico Gathers, guys like that. We come up with these things in our head about why they should make the team. But in reality, if they're not one of those first 3 categories and they're not playing special teams, more likely than not, they're not making the 53-man roster. So that's really the reason I wanted to put this out there. And Alejandro says he agrees with more sometimes does cute plays for special teams. And DJ Dog talks about our third down defense is a big factor in our starting position. And because you guys are talking about this, I got to put together something about field position because, again, this is the dead time. This is the perfect time to talk about stuff like that. So I see that's been kind of the theme of the comments. At some point, I'm going to put that together, and we're going to talk about that on the Cowboy Zone. All right, so let me get back into my special teams mode again. So remember, like I said, the basic makeup of a football team is 4 categories: the starters, the backups, the high draft picks, and then the special teamers. So I kind of went through and I put together a list of who I think are the starters and the backups on offense, defense, special teams. So we start off with offense. Now, good question by Jeff. Do we bring in a kicker to challenge Greg the Leg? His contract says no. I think his contract still has quite a few guarantees in it this year. So I don't think this will be the year they bring in a guy to challenge him. They're definitely going to challenge the punter, Hunter Nicewander, with Brian Anger. But I don't think Greg Zuerlein is going to have any competition in camp this year. So we talk about the starters and the backups, and you can agree or disagree with who goes where. But for the most part, these are kind of the guaranteed spots. So the one I want to point out is at wide receiver. I got 2 guys as backups because technically you got your number 1 guy and then you got your 2 backups. I don't consider the number 4 receiver as a backup. I only think of the number 1 guy and then the 2 guys who support him on the other side in the Z spot, and then the guy that plays the slot. So if you look on offense, and this is without going fully into offensive line because those guys usually aren't made up of special teams, you got about 17 offensive players that I would say are guaranteed roster spots. And Jack Meeker talks about Big Bo, and that's something I'm going to kind of get into in a few minutes. As I go to the defensive starters, he says he doesn't see Bo playing special teams, and as a true nose, he won't get a lot of snaps in our defense. So how does he fit? That's a good question. Again, like I said before, most teams are made up of 4 different types of players: starters, backups, high draft picks, or special teamers. I think we can all agree he won't be a starter. He was not a high draft pick. And just like you said, Jack Meeker, he's not going to be contributing on special teams a lot. So in my opinion, and I've said this quite a few times, if he's not the backup nose tackle, it's going to be difficult for him to make this team. And that's not a bad thing to say he's going to go to practice squad. That's not a bad thing at all. That's just where I see him at personally, because he doesn't fit one of these 4 categories. And DJ Dog says Fossil all but assured everyone that Anger will be the punter unless he just thinks in camp. And Jacob Trevino talks about goal line. Teams don't normally have goal line specialists. Goal line is not something you can predict in a game. We've gone games without having no goal line inside the 5 opportunities. Roster spots are very important. It's hard to assign a position for a guy who may not even touch the field just to come in on 1 or 2 snaps a game. That's very hard to think about. He would have to, in my opinion, he would have to be a definite backup nose tackle and not just a goal line specialist to get a roster spot. So now going back to what I was saying about starters and backups, I go to the defensive side of the ball, and again, we can agree to disagree on who's a starter, who's a backup, but I think we can all kind of agree these are the guys who are pretty much guaranteed a spot when you look through this list. Some of them are starters, some of them are backups. You can flip-flop wherever you like, and that gives you a total of about 16 players. So now we at 33 players that are pretty much guaranteed a spot under our 2 criteria. So then we go to our next category and we talk about the special teamers, the 3 special teamers we got. And I spelled Nice Wonder wrong. Excuse autocorrect on that. And then we go to our 3rd category, which is players secured by draft position. Like I said before, me personally, I consider anybody who's a 4th round pick or earlier to at least be guaranteed a spot for 1 year. And I think these 3 guys aren't going to be starters, aren't going to be backups, but because of where they're drafted, it guarantees them a spot for at least 1 year. So that's 6 more players to the guaranteed spots. That gives us 39 players who, in my opinion, are guaranteed for this team. So that leaves roughly 16 special team spots for the team. Now, then you got to factor in a couple of more offensive linemen, which I didn't really go into. So you're probably talking about closer to 13 special team spots when you consider we're probably going to have an extra tackle and probably an extra guard just because of injury concerns in years past. So let's put it at 13, 14 special team spots. Now, one thing I like to do when I talk about special teams, and guys, again, keep the comments coming in. If you have any questions, you have any comments you want to make, keep sending them out there. Again, I don't want to go too far into the weeds. I don't want to go over anybody's head. I want to make sure that everybody kind of understands where I'm coming from so far. So like I said, starters, backups, high draft picks, and then special teamers. So what I did was I went back and I looked at last year's roster and looked at all the snap counts. And I made a list of the top 12 special teamers in terms of snap counts, because those guys are going to make up what are considered your big 4 special teams: kick return, punt, and punt return. So what I found from doing that is that these were kind of our core special team guys. This is the top 12 players in terms of special team snaps. First of all, there's no surprise. CJ Goodwin's number 1. He's our special teams ace. He's our special teams leader. He's one of the best special teamers in NFL. And then you go down Dorrance Armstrong, Darian Thompson, and you go all the way down to Sean McKeon, who was our number 2 tight end last year. So guys, just take a quick look at this list and let me know if you have any questions. Jeff throwing out the nation on Wright hate. Why did Wright have to be a high draft pick? Apparently somebody liked him. Like I said before, teams don't keep guys at the bottom of the roster they draft them high. So that tells me this is a guy somebody really liked. And they wanted to make sure he was guaranteed a spot, especially to take him in the 3rd round, because no matter what your measurables are, 3rd round picks usually guaranteed a roster spot for a year. So these were our 12 core special teams players last year. Basically, kick return, punt return. These were our 12 guys, mixed and matched throughout those special teams. So I did a further breakdown to just kind of go through where we are. And in my opinion, the top 6 guys, 6 to 10 guys, are usually guaranteed a spot for special teams, because these are the guys that the special teams coach kind of hand selects. These are my guys. The snaps kind of back that up. And as you can see, especially if a guy's playing more than 50% of the snaps, that means the special teams coach loves him, and he'll probably go to bat for him when it comes down to final roster cuts. And as you can see, of these 12 guys, 3 of these guys are now gone from the team. So that means there are 3 roster spots that are open for other players, either drafted, undrafted, or guys who we think are kind of on the bubble to help secure their position on the team. And if you look at it, Coach Webster kind of told me anytime a team looks at their special teams, they normally pull from the linebacker position, the tight end position, and the safety position. And that's a great question, Jacob Trevino. Just in line with what I just said. Just like Coach Webster told me, most of the times when it comes to special teams, the positions that teams pull from the most are tight ends, linebackers, safeties. And then he also threw in, if a team has a fullback, he's almost definitely a special teamer. And then the third running back is usually a special teamer. So in my opinion, we talked about this a couple weeks ago when we did our 53-man roster. I don't think we're going to keep a fifth defensive tackle because I don't think he fits into the category of starter, backup, high draft pick, or special teamer. I feel like that spot will more likely go to a 7th linebacker or a 4th tight end. And honestly, I'm leaning more towards 4th tight end because I think, just like somebody pointed out before, about starters being more available and more a part of special teams. I think the fact that we have guys like Jabril Cox and Micah Parsons who are young guys, I think even though we plan on them getting a lot of snaps, they're both going to be heavily involved in special teams. So that may allow us to go one short at linebacker because we'll have Cox and Parsons giving us some contributions. And Mendoza talks about Israel, Chauncey, and Sprinkle. Like I just said, linebacker, tight end, safety. So if Mukwamu is considered a safety, I think that gives him a leg up in terms of special teams play. And Sprinkle is definitely a special teams guy. I still think he was brought in because of special teams play. Going back to college, he's played the Big Four special teams. In Washington, every year he was there, he was either first or second on the team in special team snaps. And now he comes here. We lost Blake Bell. I think he comes in and he replaces Blake Bell for special teams. Now, Basham, defensive ends, if he's athletic and he has those linebacker traits, I think that buys him a spot. But let me go back to the list, Mendoza, because I kind of went too quick over this. If you look at the list, you see where I have starters for defensive ends. At backups, I have undetermined. So as of right now, we don't know who the backup defensive ends are. So it could be Basham. It could be Golston. It could be Anai. It could be Armstrong. There are 2 spots open for backups. And in my opinion, the 2 guys that get those 2 spots, there's going to be one other guy who's going to be a special teams guy. And then whoever's the bottom man at the totem pole, he's out of here. So if Basham or Armstrong or Anai want to make the team, because I feel like Golston falls in that third criteria of 3rd round pick, he's guaranteed a spot. That's 3 spots. I think we're probably going to go 5, 6 at most. It's going to be interesting to see what Basham does in terms of special teams or backup and Armstrong and Anai, because those 3 guys are fighting for those spots. And also Rondell Carter, which is somebody nobody talks about a lot. And when I went back and I looked at, like I said, about 4 or 5 games, I noticed something very interesting about Rondell Carter. So when I went back to watch the games, I noticed that the first 5 or 6 weeks, I think he was with the Colts or whatever on their practice squad, and then he got cut and came back to Dallas. When he came back to Dallas, his last, let me find it to make sure I say it right. His last 3 to 4 games, he was contributing almost 60% of special team snaps. So weeks 13 through 16, he was on everything. Now, that, like you said, that's sneaky because he could secure himself a spot just off special teams. He was on everything. He was on punt and punt return. He even played a little kick return, which is surprising for a defensive end. Not kick return, kick off, which is surprising for a defensive end. So they got to watch out for him too to steal one of those special team spots. And then another great name, Mendoza, Azur Kamara, the Prince. Nobody talks about him out of Kansas. This kid is 6'5", 240, runs a 4.4. He was on our practice squad last year. He was kind of I would call him a more raw Randy Gregory. So year 2, he could kind of step up. Maybe he can show a little bit more on special teams. He didn't have to play special teams in Kansas because he was kind of their star pass rusher. So that's one of the reasons he didn't get a shot. So yeah, those are 2 great names to talk about when it comes to special teams. And DJ Dog, great point. This is why preseason games are so important. Teams don't look at the scoreboard really at special teams. I mean, on preseason games. They want to make sure everybody leaves healthy. They want to get some good reps to see if they can determine their backups. And they want to see how guys look on special teams. Again, phase 2 and 4 of the roster makeup. That's what preseason is about. Special teams and determining backups. So DJ Dog, you're 100% right. Preseason is extremely important. And Jacob Trevino talks about the health issues of LV and Jalen. You might want to keep both Bernard and Gifford. Those are good points. But again, remember, we drafted Micah and Cox, and we signed Neal. So even though those guys have injury concerns, we brought in 3 athletic guys who can easily replace them. And Francis Bernard, in my opinion, is a pure special teams guy at this point. So I think he pretty much has a secure spot. Looking at Gifford's special teams play, Gifford, which was very interesting, of the 16 games he played in, half the games he played more than 50% of the snaps on special teams. And then the other half, he didn't play at all. That was kind of, and it wasn't consecutive. So I couldn't say like from weeks 1 to 5, he played this much. No, he played weeks 1 and 2. And then weeks 3 and 4, he wouldn't play at all. Then week 5, he played 60% of snaps. So I know he got suspended at one point too, but that was a very unusual thing with Gifford. And it made it hard to kind of see where he was. Because like I talked about with Bernard from weeks, make sure I say this right, he played 40% of special team snaps every week. And after week 5, Bernard played at least 50% of all special team snaps. Those are very high marks for a linebacker. Those are secure spot marks, in my opinion. And great point, DJ Dog. He has been injured a lot. That doesn't help in his favor. People don't hold spots for injury-prone special teamers. So he has to really step his game up in the preseason to spin a spot. And then Jeff talks about our boy Jalen chilling in Cancun with the Cowboys takeover group. I won't get into that one anymore. So let me move on. And Jeff also talks about he forgot about Sprinkle. And Jacob asked this question. Do you think we keep Sprinkle and McKeon over Gifford or Bernard? If I had to choose between Bernard and Sprinkle, I would probably say they keep Sprinkle. Now, if it came down to Gifford, I'm sorry, not Bernard. If it came down to Gifford and Sprinkle, I think they would definitely keep Sprinkle. Now, if it came down to McKeon and Gifford, that one might be a toss-up because going back to the chart I just put up here, talking about the core special teams, Gifford and McKeon played pretty much the same amount of special team snaps last year. So they're right there at the bottom of what I would consider a core special teams player. Now, you look above them, like I said before, Blake Bell is gone, Joe Thomas is gone. That's a tight end and a linebacker. So those two guys leaving could push them up the totem pole a little bit, unless a guy like Jabril Cox or Michael Parsons plays more special teams. So it's going to be very interesting to see. Those are two positions or two players that should definitely be watched kind of at the bottom of the roster based on special teams only. And Jeff, I got Sprinkle over both of them, honestly. Like, I don't think you bring in a guy who's 26 years old. He's been a special teams ace since college, and he has 30 NFL starts. I don't see that guy losing his spot to basically two young backups. And Jack Meeker, I definitely love Bernard, his potential. He showed a lot on special teams. He made a lot of plays. He didn't play any defensive snaps, so he definitely gets a shot. And Mendoza has Sprinkle tight end 3. I agree. I still think they may go 4 tight ends, so I'm not throwing the dirt on McKeon yet. I still feel like it's between him and Gifford for one of those spots because they're kind of competing for their special teams role. All right, so let me hop back into it real quick. And guys, great questions, great comments. Thank you guys for being engaged with the discussion. And I was kind of concerned. I thought I'd be kind of by myself on this one, but I'm glad you guys are really kind of involved in the discussion. So now we're going to talk about the specific special teams units, and we're going to talk about the most important positions of those special teams units. And Jeff, this is an excellent point because this is one of those things where Cowboys fans, we all kind of want to hold on to our pet cat and the storyline, but Jarwin hasn't shown us anything yet. If we're being honest, Sprinkle has more production, more experience, and more special teams importance than Blake Jarwin. It's not unheard of to think that Blake Jarwin could be our tight end 2 or 3 because a guy like Sprinkle could come in and thrive in this game. And Shane Odom, great comment. When training camp starts, he'd be looking for a specific player to be the return specialist. There was already talking OTAs that Rico Dowdle was getting more play at punt return. Mendoza talks about Johnny Dixon quite a bit. They brought him in. He's known for being an excellent punt returner. Semi Fehoko, the 6th-round pick we got out of Stanford, he's known for punt return as well. So we have some guys coming into camp who may give us some special teams options. And we got a couple guys who were undrafted as well. And then Boss Man Fat did some punt return, Kelvin Joseph in college. Maybe they throw him back there a little bit. You just never know. Jordan Lewis did some punt return. If they're not looking for him to be a major contributor on defense, maybe this is the time they throw him back there on punt return and see what he has and let him compete. So we definitely have some options going into camp this year. It's not going to be Cedric Wilson or bust like it's been the past 2 years with no competition. So definitely, Shane, there's going to be some stuff to look out for in terms of punt return. And DJ Dog, you're right. Everybody gives him an unwarranted pass when it comes to him being a starter or a backup. Statistically, he hasn't shown us anything. All he has is a big contract. And big contracts get cut all the time, or big contract guys get put on the bench. And Charlie says if he's healthy, it would be unheard for me for him to be tight end 2 or 3. Stranger things have happened. It's not unheard of to see him being tight end 2 if he doesn't outproduce Blake Jarwin. I mean, not Blake Jarwin, Dalton Schultz. My mistake. And Jeff, tell Kendall I said hi, and I appreciate her support. And Mendoza says he thinks Jarwin would be an unsung hero. Everybody focus on our wide receivers, tight ends will eat. Definitely a possibility. The question is, does Blake Jarwin get those first team snaps, or do they let Dalton Schultz kind of pick up on where he left off at? Because we've seen in the past, whoever our number 1 tight end is, they dominate the snaps. So let's not pretend like Dalton Schultz can't come in day 1, and when training camp starts, they just give him 80-90% of tight end snaps, and Blake Jarwin stuck with the scraps. It's not unheard of. That contract won't put him over a guy who was a borderline Pro Bowler last year. And Charlie says, stat-wise, he has to get snaps. And you're right, never got him with old man Whitten here. But like I said, whoever our number 1 tight end is, they dominate the snaps. Even the year Whitten left, I can't even remember the guy's name now. I think he plays for Jacksonville now. Whoever our tight end was, he didn't produce at all. But he dominated all the tight end snaps that year. And then you look at last year. Blake Jarwin went down. Dalton Schultz. I mean, Schultz played all the snaps. Blake Bell rarely touched the field, and Sean McKeon rarely touched the field. So our number 1 tight end has always been historically a snap hog when it comes to preseason and regular season. So he has his work cut out for him to steal some of those snaps. They're not just going to immediately throw him back in there. And Mendoza says Jarwin's speed compared to Schultz helps him. Jarwin eats up yards after the catch, and that is an element that helps. Definitely Jarwin. I believe he was a former wide receiver at Oklahoma State. So he does have more wide receiver skills. He does have more speed. But again, you can't just throw Dalton Schultz away after the season he had last year. You have to give him an opportunity to kind of pick up where he left off of last season. Now, they could put Jarwin on the back burner, or they could let them have a pure competition. History in Dallas shows whoever the number 1 is, he gets the spot until he loses it. So definitely another great competition. And guys, next week, Lambo and I are doing our show that was supposed to do this week for top 5 position battles. And you guys are already kind of covering a couple of the position battles that Lambo and I have pointed out. So make sure you tune in next week as we take a deeper dive into the top 5 position battles on this team. All right, so now, like I said before, we talk about special teams. We're going to talk about the big 4 special teams units. I'm going to show you a couple of charts highlighting those special teams, and I'm going to talk about the most important positions. So again, guys, if you haven't done so already, make sure you share this, make sure you like it, and make sure you keep those great questions and comments coming in. I see the comments are starting to kind of venture off into a tight end debate. So make sure you guys come back next week, because I can guarantee you either Lambo or myself have tight end as a top 5 count position battle, and you guys can really let it rip on the Jarwin versus Schultz conversation. And Mendoza says he always had faith in Schultz, even when it was the Rico train back then. Had belief he could be viable, and you did go to battle for him. I do remember that. And again, tight end from Stanford. Just because of that, you got to give him a shot. Just because of the history of that organization and their college team. All right, guys. So first off, let's talk about punt team. And to me, this is one of the most important units. So when you look at a punt team, you look at the line, and it's basically the same thing you think of with an offensive line. You have a center, which is your snapper, and then you have guards, you have tackles, and then you have guys who play kind of a tight end position or what they call a wing. Now, the difference is on the offensive line, the guards and tackles are guards and tackles. They're 300-pound guys. On the punt team, you need guys that can run. So normally your guards are tight ends and athletic defensive ends like a Blake Bell, a Dorrance Armstrong, Rondell Carter. And actually, just doing my research on this, when I looked at the punt team, the guards on punt team were Dorrance Armstrong and Francis Bernard. Then you go to the tackle position. Again, it's not normal tackles. The tackle position are normally guys who are athletic. They're usually like big linebackers. So at the tackle position, and again, the further away you go from center, the more smaller and athletic the guys get on the punt unit. So last year, the tackles on punt team were Luke Gifford and Justin March. Now, again, Justin March is gone. So that's a spot open on punt team. And then if you take a look at the X and the Z, these are what we call our gunners. And everybody who's familiar with punt team knows what a gunner is. The gunners are the guys who are on the outside, and they're usually the ones that make the tackles. Now, NFL rules, something I wasn't even aware of. Coach Webster told me this. When you talk about the most important positions on punt team, they're your gunners. And the reason for that is they're the only two positions that can cross the line of scrimmage before the ball is snapped. So when you guys go back and look at those fake punts we did, you will see they always kind of got thrown to the gunners because those are the guys who can kind of release before the ball is kicked. And then you have another position called PP. This position is your personal protector. And then, of course, the P is your punter. So when I do a further breakdown on this, I look at the punt unit and I realize the most important positions on punt team are your gunners, because they're the guys who go down and make the tackles, and then your personal protector. The reason the personal protector is important is because he's basically the center of your special teams punt unit. He's the guy who calls the protections. He lets the guys up front know when and where they should block at. And if somebody screws up on an assignment and a guy comes free, it's the personal protector's job to pick up that block. So not only is he considered the quarterback of the punt unit, he's also considered like the running back blocking for the quarterback. So those three positions are the most important. And when I look at the team, I looked at the first 2 games of the year, and then I looked at the last 2 to 3 games of the year to kind of see if there were changes in those positions. Now, the reason I did that is because, as you guys know, we didn't have an offseason last year. And Bones Fossil was a brand new coach. So Bones Fossil had no clue who was good at what on special teams until the season started. He got glimpses here or there in the offseason a little bit, but he never was really able to implement it in an actual football setting. So because of that, I wanted to see if the guys he put in at the beginning of the year are the same guys he had at the end of the year, to see if these guys are really considered his core special teams guys. And that answered a lot of questions for me when it came down to these special teams units. So now we go back to punt team, and Jeff makes a great point. It's the last line of defense for the punter. Just like I said before, the personal protector's job is to call out the blocking scheme on the front line. If anybody slips through, like Jeff said, it's the last line of defense. It's his job to pick up where the gap is and block that guy so he cannot block the punt. Very important position. And Mendoza talks about he's curious if Mukwamu can do that. Honestly, I don't think that's something he could pick up in the offseason. I feel like it has to be somebody that's seasoned at doing something like that. And Noah Brown has probably done this since college. And because of that reason, I think that's one of the many reasons I think he's secure for this spot. Unless a guy like Mukwamu was fortunate enough to be a personal protector. So, guys, in the comments, great point, Mendoza. If there's a player, as I'm talking about special teams, I didn't get enough time to go back and look at some college games to see who played where. So if there's a player you want me to go back and look at, I will go back and watch at least 2 of their college games and pay close attention to their special teams units to see if that guy was on special teams, because it shouldn't take me more than 45 minutes a player to do that. And I don't mind doing that. I love stuff like that. So I can already tell just from looking at the comments, Mendoza wants me to check out Mukwamu to see what special teams units he played on in college. And Jacob Trevino, he talks about Rico Dowdle did that, and he did some fake punts up the middle. That's a great point. And let me pull up my notes real quick. I didn't notice Rico Dowdle was on punt team on the 5 or 6 games I looked at. So that may be one of those things that we may look out for. Again, I think a position like that is so important. A guy like Noah Brown might be secure for that spot. Now, where Rico can get a spot at is at gunner. Because when I looked at the gunners, and let me go back to my chart again. When I looked at the gunners on the punt unit, of course, CJ Goodwin was one gunner. At the beginning of the year, Cedric Wilson was the other gunner. By week 6, he was gone. And they put Darian Thompson there a little bit, and also a little bit of Malik Turner. But by week 13, Reggie Robinson was our other gunner. Again, I talk about Reggie Robinson. You're going to see his name pop up quite a bit when it comes to end of the year for important special teams positions. Once he got on the field, he made quite a few impacts about special teams. And Shane Odom, you're right. They do need to get the job done. They got to get more hang time on the ball. And that's why they brought in Brian Anger. Like, honestly, Nice Wonder didn't really get the job done last year. He showed us some good spurts, but they brought in competition for him. So you are right. They do need to get the job done, and competition has been brought in on the punt unit to see if we can find a better punter. So this is pretty much punt team. You got your 2 gunners, personal protector. Those are kind of the most important positions outside of snapper and the actual punter himself. The other positions are pretty much the personal protector tells you what to do. You block who the personal protector tells you who to block. If you miss it, it's his job to kind of clean up. And if you miss it too much, you get replaced. Now, going through the punt unit, I'll let you guys know this. The only person there were 2 people whose positions were taken off of the punt unit. Bradley and I lost his spot to Rondale Carter by the end of the year, and Justin Marsh lost his spot to Rico Dowdle. So Rico Dowdle was actually one of the ends on the punt unit. And yeah, definitely, you like to hear that about Reggie. You want to see him in the preseason. From what I saw, if our defensive coaches and special team and our DB coaches don't use Reggie Robinson, Bones Fossil has a plan for him, because he kept popping up quite a bit on special teams units. So now let's go to the punt return unit. Now, punt return is labeled a little bit differently. Same thing like kick return. They list the players by numbers, and it's normally closest to the snapper. So it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. R5 is right. L5 is left. So this gives you a basic diagram of what the punt return unit looks like. And at the beginning of the show, I talked about this a little bit. One of the reasons I think our punt return unit isn't as good as it should be. Most teams, if you guys are aware of punt return, most teams have two guys on the outside that block the gunners because the gunners are so important to punt return. Most teams will have two guys blocking each gunner. For the Cowboys, every game I watched, they only used one guy to block the gunner. What that tells me is if it's only one guy blocking the gunner, that means he has a much better chance of getting back there because it's a lot harder to avoid two guys than it is one. If you make one guy miss at the line of scrimmage, you got a free release to the punt returner. At least if it's two guys, if you can avoid one, you still got to get past that second guy. And I feel like this is one of those things about our punt return unit that caused us to lack in terms of being able to have returns. We only have one guy, which is called a jammer, going against their gunner when most teams have two. Something you guys should pay attention to when the season starts. So now we talk about punt return unit, and the most important positions on punt return, in my opinion, and from speaking to Coach Webster, are your two jammers and then your outside rushers, because the guys who are at R1 and L1 are the guys that you expect to get the most pressure on the punter. And when I looked at, again, I looked at the first two games, I looked at the last three games. At the beginning of the year, our jammers, of course, CJ Goodwin, he's on everything. And then there was a combination of Rashad Robinson and Malik Turner. Sometimes they would rotate. Sometimes, on some instances, they would have two guys blocking one gunner. But CJ Goodwin was always by himself blocking the other gunner. By the end of the year, the two gunners on the team, the two jammers on the team, CJ Goodwin and Reggie Robinson. So by about week 13 through 16, when you look at the most important positions on punt and punt return, Reggie Robinson was right there beside CJ Goodwin in one of the most important positions. Definitely stood out to me. And then you talk about the other positions. You talk about the outside rushers. Rico Dowdle and Noah Brown, they were the outside rushers pretty much the whole year. Two very important positions. They generate the pressure on the punter from the outside. And then the other most important position is punt returner. It was a combination of Cedric Wilson and CeeDee Lamb. Of course, like I always talk about, Cedric Wilson has about 12 career punt returns. That's not going to cut it. CeeDee Lamb, I think he only has three punt returns last year. That's not going to cut it. And Jacob Trevino talks about Mukwamu and Wright are perfect jammers with their long arms. Wright concerns me because when I watch him play in games, he doesn't even jam on defense. He gets pushed around quite a bit. So that would be concerning. Now, Mukwamu might be interesting, but being a jammer is more about athleticism as it is about length. And Mukwamu being a 4-5 guy, usually the other team's gunners are their fastest players on their team. So if you got a 4-5 Mukwamu going against a 4-3 name your wide receiver DB, that can get pretty ugly if he misses at the line, especially if we do what Dallas normally does and they only put one jammer outside on the gunner. So I would probably put Mukwamu more of like the L4 R4 guy because of his length. Those guys, their jobs as L4 and R4, their jobs are to cover the inside in case of a fake, and then they rush each side of the long snapper and try to get their hands in the air. So I could see Mukwamu being better at one of those positions as I could an outside jammer. And Mendoza, talks about that. Wright gets crossed a lot on jams. He definitely has to get stronger. He could be a good special teamer in terms of a jammer in the future. Right now, he has a lot to work on. Shane Odom, great question. Is that a philosophy or is it a lack of talent? I wish I knew the answer to that question. I would hope it's philosophy, and I would hope they don't have enough guys that they can put out there to kind of do that. But to me, I would feel like that's more of a scheme thing because just from what we know about Bones Fossil so far, he's a very aggressive special teams coach. So it seems to be right in his wheelhouse to focus more on putting pressure on the punter than it does to cover the gunners on the outside. That just seems like a Bones Fossil thing to me, to try to be more aggressive on all of your special teams. And Jeff, great point. He doesn't show much athleticism to me either. It's going to be interesting to see where he fits in on special teams. I just don't know. That's something I'm definitely going to be paying attention to. But like we talked about, in my opinion, third rounders normally have a longer grace period. So he gets a year to figure it out. At least 1 year. All right, so now we go to the kickoff unit. And we talk about kickoff. And once again, like I said before, kickoff is normally counted L5 432, R5 432. So this is not a Bones Fossil thing that I have up here. This is just a generic kickoff philosophy. Your number 5 and your number 4 guys are normally what they call wedge busters. Wedges are illegal in NFL right now, so you just call them gap busters now. Their job is to ram the guys who play guard to open up holes for the other guys. That's what the 5 and the 4 do. Then you go to the 2 and the 1. The number 2 guy's job is to contain. Their job is to make sure nobody breaks to the outside. That's the only thing they have to do. And then the number 1s, their job is to funnel everything inside. So their job is to make sure that once the 5s and the 4s open up the gap for the 3s, the number 1 guys make sure that whoever the returner is going to keep it inside the middle. That makes the guys who play the number 3 spots positions very important, because those are the guys who are the most responsible for making your special teams tackles on kickoff. So I'll give you guys another second to take a look at this. I know I kind of went through it pretty fast, but if you guys can kind of read the context up here, it explains it as well. And like I said, number 5 and number 4, their job is just to be bullies. Whoever are the guys on the inside, their jobs are to knock them out of the way, almost like opening the gate for the number 3s. And the number 3 guys' job are to go full speed, run through those gaps, and go make the tackle. And if they can't make the tackle, that leaves the number 1 guy's job to kind of clean up, and then the number 2s are just outside contained to make sure nobody breaks on the outside. So now, I take a look at about 5 or 6 games, and like I just said before, the most important positions on special teams for kickoff are the guys who open the gaps, who are the 5s and the 4s, And the absolute most important positions are the threes because they're the guys responsible for making most of your tackles. So we look at the L3 and the R3 position. Once again, no surprise. Our R3 position the entire season was held down by CJ Goodwin. Best special teams player. He's always going to be in the most impactful spots. We look at the L3 position. At the beginning of the year, Donovan Wilson was our L3. By the end of the year, our L3 was Reggie Robinson for the last 3 games. So you keep seeing a theme develop. Beginning of the year, Reggie Robinson wasn't touching the field. By week 13 or so, he finally starts to get involved in special teams. And every time I look at a game, when I look at what's considered the most important position of that special teams, Reggie Robinson ends up right there with CJ Goodwin in that position. That says a lot about where I think he may end up in terms of his job security. Now, I didn't put the 5s and the 4s on the screen because I really want to focus on the 3s, the guys who make the tackles. So when I go back and look, because I got my notes right here, when I look at the kickoff game, the 5 positions were held all year by Dorrance Armstrong and Joe Thomas. So Joe Thomas is gone this year. That opens up a spot. Joe Thomas was a linebacker. For you guys that like a Luke Gifford, he did not play on kick return. Nope, I take that back. He was the R4. So Luke Gifford was the R4 beside Dorrance Armstrong. Joe Thomas, Francis Bernard was on that. So honestly, I would probably look for Micah Parsons to be your R5 or your L5 when the season starts. Big, fast, physical, just blow guys off the ball. So if Joe Thomas leaves, I look for a guy like a Micah Parsons to fill that spot. But once again, DJ Dawg and Mendoza, Reggie Robinson makes his mark. Every time I looked at a game and I looked at what Coach Webster told me was the important position for that unit, Reggie Robinson ended up being in that spot by the end of the year. Reggie Robinson again. And, of course, CJ Goodwin for the entire year holds down the other spot. All right, so now we go to the last unit. And this one, I don't have the chart because this one was unusual. When I look at my kickoff return unit, like I said before, Dallas was unusual last year in how they did punt return because they don't put 2 jammers on the gunner. They were also unusual for 2 reasons on the kickoff return unit. Now, I don't have a comparison up, and I don't have an actual diagram. I had to kind of make this one because I couldn't find a comparison to it. But normally, when you look at the typical kickoff return unit, if you guys see it's usually 3 levels. That's the first difference. For most teams, when they do kickoff return, it's usually 5 guys up front. They usually have 2 returners, and then they have 4 guys in the middle. For Dallas, most of the time, they only have 4 guys up front. So they took a guy from the front line, and they brought him down to the second line. I thought that was very unusual. The second thing I noticed was most teams normally have 2 returners on kickoff return. Dallas lets Tony Pollard be back there by himself, and they bring the second returner kind of up as an up back type guy. So you lose your first line of defense, and you kind of add it onto your second line of defense, which in my opinion, that gives a kickoff guy a little bit more opportunity to get to your returner without getting touched. I thought that was very unusual that we mostly did 4 guys up front instead of 5. Another thing that stood out to me, for most teams, when they have their kickoff return unit, and I talk about the first level, those first level guys are usually defensive ends, tight ends, and fullbacks. For Dallas, it was all skill position guys. It's almost like Bones wants to be aware of a fake kick at all times. Like he wants to always have a hands team type feel. It also tells me he wants to emphasize more speed on this kickoff return unit. The downside to that is if the other team is doing a kickoff and their guys are all linebackers and defensive ends and tight ends, and we expect our wide receivers to block them, that's not going to happen. So I personally feel like that's another reason why our kickoff return unit is not as successful as it should be. For one, they take an extra guy off the front line, and for two, they don't put any beef on the front line. Now, I talked to Coach Webster, and he told me that the most important part of the kickoff return unit is the front line. The front line pretty much dictates where the second, on most teams who have only 3 levels, where Dallas has 4, on most teams, the front line dictates what the second level does and what the third level does. So on this team, at the beginning of the year, our front line was Rico Dowdle, CJ Goodwin, Malik Turner, and Noah Brown. Those were our front line blockers. So I guess when they go back in their 10-yard sets, whoever they block, then they assume the second level is going to pick up some guys, and then the third level is going to pick up some guys, and then the returner runs. By the end of the year, our front wall was consisted of CJ Goodwin, Malik Turner, Reggie Robinson, Noah Brown. And Rico Dowdle was put more at that third level, kind of like an emergency returner / last line defense blocker. Once again, Reggie Robinson pops up on a key special teams unit. Something to be aware of. And, of course, Noah Brown's there all year. And Eric Berger, great point. It could be a reaction to the uptick in touchbacks and implementation of starting line of scrimmage at 25. You're right. It tells me, and that's a great point. It tells me the team's not really concerned about returning the ball. They're more concerned about being able to field an onside kick at all times. So that's a great point. Now, I don't know what that tells us in terms of all the questions I've seen about people saying we need to improve our return game, but that definitely makes sense. So great point, Eric, about that. All right, guys. So that's pretty much all I have about special teams. And Eric, just like you said, you keep skill guys everywhere instead of trick plays. You know, Bones Fossil has kind of proved he's the king of trick plays. So he doesn't want to have them ran on him, and he likes to try to run them on everybody else. Mendoza says Dixon replaces Malik. Malik Turner showed up quite a bit on special teams, and he was our 6th receiver. So that spot is more than likely gone. Philip Mullins, thank you for tuning in. Appreciate your support. I'm about to close this thing out, but definitely thank you for popping your head in for a few minutes. If you get a chance, go back and check out a little bit of what I talked about. If you're not really familiar about special teams and what they do and how our team likes to implement certain players, I just gave you a great hour lesson just talking about special teams in general. And thank you, Mendoza. I appreciate that. We definitely got spoiled with Joe being our special teams guy forever and being arguably the best special teams coach ever in in the NFL. So we definitely got spoiled by that. But I feel like you could see this unit changing. Like I said before, Bones Fossil didn't have a real offseason last year. So as the season progressed, he started to put together his core special teams guys. From what I saw, of course, CJ Goodwin, Francis Bernard, Reggie Robinson, Noah Brown, Dorrance Armstrong. Guys like that started to show up on every special teams unit in terms of the big four. And then you got a guy like Rico Dowdle who's stepping up. Then you look at them signing a guy like Jeremy Sprinkle to come in. Basham could be a special teams guy. You just don't know. And Jack Mika, thank you, man. This is the best compliment I can get right here. As a guy who never played football, I hope I made it as plain as possible. I hope you got something out of it. Even if I end up being wrong, I still think this is great information for you guys to know. And if I'm right, and a guy like a Reggie Robinson makes the team over Anthony Brown, which I think is going to happen, when you hear fans saying, no, I'm shocked they got rid of Anthony Brown. Now you know why. If Anthony Brown's not a starter or a backup or a special teams guy, it's going to be tough sledding for him to make the roster. Thank you, Eric Berger. Definitely appreciate that. BJ Nix, appreciate you tuning in for a few minutes. I checked you out today with the UK podcast, guys. A great job. If you guys have a few minutes after I shut down, make sure you go to the UK Cowboys website and Facebook page and YouTube. Had a great interview today. BJ Nix with Mike Poland talking. I believe they talk linebackers today. So if you want to get a further breakdown of the linebacker position to kind of follow up what I just talked about with special teams, definitely check that out. BJ Nix coming in already saying Brown is my surprise cut. You know, we can always go back and forth about this one. It would definitely be a surprise to me if he got cut. And BJ Nix putting it out there. Tonight he's going live about Kelvin Joseph. If you guys aren't aware, of course, he wasn't really at OTAs. He's been kind of away from the team. Everybody's starting to kind of speculate on what's going on with him just because of his past and the problems he had at LSU. So now Facebook media is starting to go a little bit over this in the dead time. So I'm sure BJ Nix is going to give you guys some good insight on Kelvin Joseph, what he brings to the team, and a little bit about where he's at. And Nix, thank you, man. Let me get off for a minute, recharge, and then we'll see what the time looks like. But I'll definitely be tuning in. So if I can't join in live, I'll definitely be in the comments. All right, guys. Well, I think that's pretty much all I got for today. Anybody have any questions about what I said? Feel free to put them in the comments now before I get out of here. And like I said before, special teams is important. I'm going to keep emphasizing this, especially during the off season. I hope you guys got some great insight from this. Like I said before, I relied heavily on my friend Coach Webster. He's a current defensive coordinator at Northeast Community College, Mississippi, former national champion junior college team. He's done several internships with the Atlanta Falcons and the Arizona Cardinals. He's mainly been a follower of Marquez Manuel, former DC for Atlanta. So for the past 2 years, because of his relationship, he was able to go to the Falcons training camp and hang out with Dan Quinn. He has a bit of a relationship with Dan Quinn, talks to him a little bit. Hopefully, if all things go well with Dan Quinn this year, he may get a chance to go out to Dallas next year to their training camps and do a little bit of interning with the DBs. So he knows Dan Quinn pretty well. So hopefully next week, Coach Webster will be joining the show. He'll talk to us a little bit about Dan Quinn, maybe have a few stories, and he'll give us some insight on that defense that they run, because he bases his college scheme and formations heavily off of what he learned during the time in those training camps. So it should be a very interesting show. As always, you guys can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Bluff City Cowboys. You can find me on Twitter at Bluff Cowboys. Got the information right here at the bottom. Make sure you tune in next week, Thursday, 7:30 Central Standard Time for the Cowboy Zone. Hopefully my co-host Lambo will be back, and we'll do some Cowboys talking. If Coach Webster isn't free next week, we'll be following up on our top 5 position battles going into training camp. So either way, it's going to be a great show. Make sure you guys tune in. Make sure you guys like. Make sure you guys continue to support. And once again, I'm Marcus Jones, Bluff City Cowboy. Thank you guys for giving me an hour and a half of your time. Make sure you share this after the fact, because even though you've already seen it, there are some people who haven't seen it who really need to know what we talked about tonight. So thank you guys again for watching. Have a good night, and I'm out.